Afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us from. My name is Kelsi, and I am super excited to talk with you today about the state of Washington. Now, before we get started, make sure you know that this is the state of Washington and not the capital, Washington, D.C. Easy to get these mixed up, but they are on two totally separate coasts of the U.S. And so today we're going to focus on the state of Washington. Before we get started, if you want to drop in the chat where you're joining us from, we are so excited to be with you today. I'm here with my friend Colleen, and we are going to go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and move to our first slide. So a little bit about me before we get started. My name is Kelsi Robinson. I'm the senior recruiter here at Worldwide Health Staff Solutions. I'm located in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been with Worldwide for almost 3 years as a recruiter, and I am dedicated to helping nurses achieve their career goals in the U.S. I love working with each and every one of you, and I also love traveling. I've traveled a lot over throughout the U.S., and my most recent trip was to the state of Washington and to Seattle, and also to Vancouver, Canada. And so that is one of the reasons that I'm joining you today, is because I was recently in Seattle and loved it so much and just want to share with you guys all about it. Next slide, please. Some of my favorite things about Washington, it has such a diverse landscape and so many activities. There's something for everyone, whether you love cities or nature. The city, I spent a lot of time in the city when I was there, and it's super beautiful, super accessible, but you're also really close to mountains and nature. The ocean is close by as well, and so there's just so much to do, a wide variety of activities. Like I mentioned, it's a super accessible area. They have trains and buses that get you throughout the city, but also it's really easy to get to other spots on the West Coast. When I was there, I took a train up into Canada to Vancouver, but it's also easy to get to Oregon and other spots, even in California. And so if you're somebody that likes to travel, you want to see a lot of the U.S. while you're here, Washington might be the right spot for you. Being on the West Coast is a bonus for travel. There's so much to see on the West Coast of the United States, but it's also a lot more accessible to different parts of Asia. And so if you're traveling to the Philippines or to South Korea or any other part of Asia, flights are a lot more accessible. You can even get direct flights because you're on the West Coast there. And so, if traveling to other parts of the world is a priority for you as well, this is a great place to be rooted in the U.S. And then also the most important thing about any city is its food. The food there was incredible. I had so many amazing things. There's so much diversity in the food scene as well. And so no matter what kind of food you like, there's always something that you'll be able to find in Washington. We'll go ahead to the next slide, and I'm going to introduce my co-host today. Her name is Colleen. Colleen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Colleen Smith. I am a healthcare recruiter with sister company of Worldwide Health. I work for Medical Solutions. I'm based in Seattle, Washington. We live just a little bit south of the city. We used to live in the city actually up until a couple weeks ago. So I have been in healthcare recruiting for 3 years and joined Medical Solutions earlier this year. I have a special little insight to the healthcare world. My husband is a nurse. He used to be an ER travel nurse, which is what brought us out here to Seattle. He took a travel contract here and we fell in love with it and decided to stay. He now does critical care transport for a private ambulance company. So I love providing those insights that I've had on both sides of, being a spouse to a healthcare worker as well as working in the industry as well. So I really love being a trusted resource for clinicians, helping them achieve whatever their personal or professional goals. And outside of work, I really love hiking. We bought paddle boards when we moved here to Washington because the number of lakes, rivers, ocean, it's incredible. We also love going to concerts all the time and traveling overseas. Next slide, please. My list of favorite things about Washington was long, so I had to condense it. But for pretty much any nature lover, the number of national parks here, endless hiking trails, like I said, lakes, beaches. If you are into winter sports with snow, we have tons of ski resorts here. So mountains, oceans, anything, you name it. The picture in the top left is myself with our dogs paddleboarding. that mountain and lake is just about 20 minutes outside of Seattle. So you can have the city life and then take a short trip and you're right in the middle of nature, which is really cool. Also, like Kelsey said, for foodies, seafood lovers, any type of salmon, we're in the middle of oyster season right now. Clams, especially Asian cuisine here is phenomenal. So any corner you go to, you're going to find some really good food. We also have tons and tons of venues for arts, music. So any big name, small name artists coming through, there's a spot for them for you to go see. And then, like Kelsey said, public transportation in the Seattle, Tacoma area, even on the east side of the state in Spokane, is super affordable, super easy. So trains, a light rail, monorail, buses, ferries to get you across the waterways that run most of them 24/7, if not about 20 hours a day. And then my other favorite thing about coming to Washington is the weather. The summers are what I'm going to call perfect. It's a nice, mild, non humid temperature, and you have about 16 hours of daylight in the summer to go out and enjoy the outdoors. And in the winter, because we are at sea level, it doesn't get very cold. So we really don't get that much snow, maybe 1 or 2 days a year of snow, which is really helpful. But if you do love snow, take a 20, 30-minute drive. You can get to some snow pretty easily. Just really quickly, a few of these pictures here that I chose to include. You can see the tulips there in the red. Those bloom in the springtime, and there are fields and fields and fields of tulips not far out from outside of the city. This huge bird picture, it's a peregrine falcon, the fastest bird, and actually I think the fastest animal in the world. This landed on our balcony downtown Seattle
Wow.
about 3 months ago. So nature everywhere, even in the city. So tons and tons to do, whether you're a nature nerd like myself or love being in the city.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Colleen.
Yeah, you're
We're
welcome.
so lucky to have somebody with us today that actually lives in Washington and can speak to it. And so, if you have questions about what it's like to live in Washington, what it's like to live in different parts of the state, go ahead and drop those in the chat. We're going to be answering questions at the end. So, all the questions that you've got about Washington or even parts of the West Coast, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll get to you in just a few minutes. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So like Colleen mentioned, the state of Washington really gets all 4 seasons. Is that right, Colleen? You guys really get to experience all the different temperatures there?
Yeah, pretty much. In I would say from like October through April, it's going to be about the same temperature in like mid 30s to 50s for most of the year, and then summer is in like that 70-degree Fahrenheit.
Awesome. When I was there, I was talking with somebody who had just moved there from the East Coast. And I was like, why'd you move to Washington? What do you like about living here? And the first thing they said was the weather. And this is while it was raining outside. It was kind of cold and a little bit dreary. But they said during the summers, you can just not have better weather than you do in Washington. There are lots of major cities in Washington, but a couple that we've chosen to highlight today, because some of you might have already signed offers going to these cities or might be considering offers from these cities, are of course Seattle. They have approximately around 700,000 residents, which makes it a pretty large U.S. city. And then Burien, which is a suburb of Seattle. We currently are working with a hospital that's located in Burien, and they're a smaller as far as residency goes, but they are a suburb of Seattle. Colleen, it's pretty easy to get into the major parts of Seattle from Burien. Is that right?
Absolutely. There's a major bus stop right in Burien that can take you to Seattle less than 30 minutes.
That's awesome. And then the other city that we've chosen to highlight is Gig Harbor. Colleen, can you tell us a little bit about like where Gig Harbor is located or about that area? I don't have much experience with Gig
Sure.
Harbor.
Yeah, Gig Harbor is about an hour southwest of Seattle. It's right on the Puget Sound, so that water that sits right next to the city, and then you have the Olympic Mountains and then the ocean. So it's really, really close to a ton of national park areas there, and really close to what's pictured here on the right, Mount Rainier. So it's really accessible as well to get the
That's
city.
awesome. And then, like Colleen mentioned, Washington is known for national parks like Mount Rainier, which you can see in that photo there, diverse landscapes from mountains to coastlines. And one thing we wanted to highlight is their iconic coffee culture with their globally renowned coffee shop. So, whatever you're interested in, you will find in Seattle or the surrounding areas. We'll go ahead and move to the next slide. So we want to hit you with some quick stats about life in Washington. The state's population is about 7 million, so pretty busy state. There's a lot going on there. The employment rate is pretty low at 4.2%. In a minute, we're going to talk about some of the other job opportunities. And so if you're a nurse and your spouse is coming with you, they're not a nurse, it will be very easy for them to find a job in Washington. There's a lot of job opportunities there. We've also listed the median home price and the average monthly rent. We'll talk more about these about cost of living in just a couple of moments. The average commute time is around 30 minutes, depending on where you live and the type of transportation you choose to use. But like we mentioned, it's super accessible with trains and buses. When I was there a couple of weeks ago, I landed in the airport and it was super easy to just get on a train and go straight into the city. I didn't need to call a taxi or anything like that. It was really easy to get to. Something that Washington is pretty well known for is their amount of rain. They do get a lot of rain throughout the year, but they also, because like Colleen mentioned, they're at sea level, they don't get a ton of snow, and it's also not super cold all year round like you would think for a state that's that far north.
And I will say, with all of that rain, it's green every day of the year, all of the trees and grass and everything. So this picture here is what it looks like right now in Washington.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I'm jealous, Colleen. It's raining over here today in Charlotte, but it is not beautiful and green outside. So I'm definitely a little bit jealous of all your green there. Some of the top reasons to live there, the cost of living is affordable as far as it goes with major cities. Of course, major cities in the US are going to have higher costs of living than more rural areas, but Seattle and other areas do have a pretty average cost of living. Rich cultural heritage and festivals, world-renowned cuisine, like we mentioned, a pretty mild climate, access to national parks and outdoor activities, strong community and family-oriented values, opportunities and technologies, aerospace, and healthcare industries. We'll go ahead to the next slide. So currently we are hiring for our client Common Spirit in Washington State. They have a couple locations currently, the one that we mentioned in Burien and then also in Gig Harbor. But we continue to work with Common Spirit and other clients that have hospitals and hospital facilities in the state of Washington. And so if Washington is a priority location for you, or maybe it's a location you're now considering based on some of the stuff you're hearing today, I'd encourage you to apply at our website. We'll include a link later on in the presentation. But we work with a number of hospitals across Washington State. And so we do have interview opportunities coming up in the next couple of months. And so go ahead and apply if you haven't already, as we'd love to talk with you more about the current employer Common Spirit and what their qualifications are. Currently, we are hiring for NCLEX positions. I'll answer some questions in the chat later if you don't have NCLEX, but these positions currently are RN positions for nurses with their NCLEX. Next slide, please. Awesome. So I already saw a question in the chat about this, about licensure requirements and English language requirements. Let's see. I believe somebody asked, can an overseas nurse become a registered nurse in Washington without a social security number? The answer is yes. Of course, these things are always subject to change because they're governed by the state themselves. But right now, you do not need your social security number for the issuance of your license. And you might be thinking, what does that mean? What is a social security number? I'm not sure. That just means that you can get your license issued before you arrive in the US and before your social security number is issued, which happens after you've arrived in the US. So it means that your licensure process is a little bit more smooth and you're able to start work a little bit sooner because you don't have to wait for your social security number to get your license. If you've already passed your NCLEX in a different state that's not Washington, but you sign an offer for Washington, we have a fantastic licensure team that will help you endorse your license to the correct state. Currently, for their English acceptances, they accept TOEFL, IELTS, OET, and MET. You might be asking about PTE. Right now, they don't accept PTE, but those things are always changing at the state level. So, keep an eye out for that as things move forward, and your case manager will be able to update you on the current experience requirements for English exam. Next slide, please. Awesome. So we're a little bit about cost of living. Colleen, you want to start us off here and talk about your experience with cost of living or anything that you'd want to add?
Sure. My husband and I are originally from Ohio, so the Midwest, right in the center of the country. And comparatively, it's closer. I should say Seattle's a little bit closer to the San Francisco, California cost of living. But obviously, pay and things like that reflect on the West Coast to make up for those cost of living. So Burien and Gig Harbor are going to be a little bit less than the city of Seattle, but pretty much in line with each other.
Absolutely. And of course, all of these costs that you see here depend on the size of your family. If you're a single person moving to these areas, your cost of living is going to be less. If you have your spouse with you, they will be able to be added to your petition and get a green card as well, and so be able to work. So you have both of those incomes coming in. And like Colleen mentioned, the cost of living is taken into consideration when salaries are calculated. Employers use your years of experience to help calculate that salary. And so we're able to make sure that you have a livable wage in that location. Next slide, please. Job opportunities. There are a lot of job opportunities in Seattle and the surrounding areas. Colleen, when we were talking a couple days ago, you mentioned multiple tech hubs that are in that area. Is that right?
Yeah, so Amazon has a humongous hub downtown Seattle, not only just with warehouses, but also their in-office jobs. Microsoft, Facebook, Google also has an office down there too. So tons and tons of tech opportunities. They also have a lot of aerospace with Boeing having a branch here as well. And then Seattle Airport. There are also tons and tons of casinos. So anyone in the hospitality industry as well has tons of opportunities for jobs.
That's awesome. So like I mentioned, if your spouse is added as a dependent on your visa, they'll also receive a visa in the process that will allow them to work if you're coming on an EB3 visa for green card. And so it will be very easy for them to get a job, especially if they're in a tech or hospitality industry, or even if they're in hospital fields. There are lots of hospitals and other medical facilities in the area. And so there's always lots of job opportunities in this area. And we'll go ahead to the next slide, please. Awesome. So now we're going to hit with some Q&A. So if you haven't already dropped your question in the chat, go ahead and do so. Before we hit those questions, I just want to give a little bit of a recap and talk a little bit about personally why I think that Seattle is a great option. And then Colleen, if you want to jump in and add some final thoughts as well. I just visited for the first time. I was only there for a couple of days. And so I can't say, yeah, I've lived there and this is the best city ever. You should totally move there. But from my experience, I think that this is a great place for somebody that is starting their journey in the US. If you want to be in a city that isn't a major city, that isn't crazy all the time, but also has accessibility to nature, accessibility to other jobs, this is the right city for you. And if you're somebody that needs to travel to other parts of the world regularly, the airport was super accessible. And, if I was to move to the West Coast, I definitely think that this region of the West Coast would be ideal for me. I love where I live, but I also think that Seattle is just such an amazing city.
I feel exactly the same way, Kelsi. Seattle is so fun. And even if you aren't a big city person, you can still find tons of cities nearby that have tons of different cultural festivals, community values, like just really close-knit communities where you can find friends and like build relationships that way. Or if you are in the city, they have different avenues of like making friends and joining different groups and things like that, which I really, really love about the city. And then the nature and weather, I can't say it enough. It's so good. It's so good here.
That's awesome. I definitely need to book my next trip for the summertime and get to
For
experience
sure.
all the outside and the nature stuff that you were talking about. The first question in here that we see, somebody is asking if we can discuss the cost of living in Washington compared to other states in the Midwest. Colleen, I think you talked about this a little bit, but will you maybe mention this again because you have experience living in the Midwest and then moved to this area?
For sure. Definitely the Midwest is going to be a little bit lower cost of living. It's most places in the Midwest have a few larger cities, but
Mhm.
nothing quite as large as like the Seattle area. So the cost of living is a lot lower. But like we talked about, it does kind of line up with compensation whenever hospitals are looking at that. So keep in mind it can vary just depending on the area that you're in. But yeah, the cost of living in the Midwest versus the West Coast is less, but there are other things like compensation that take into account.
Absolutely. And I don't think that they have those giant, giant mountains, maybe in Ohio, Colleen, that you have in Washington.
Unfortunately, it's not. And it snows a lot.
The next question we already touched on briefly, but can an overseas nurse become a registered nurse in Washington without a social security number? Currently, with the rules and regulations that are in place, yes, you can get your license without your social security number. The next question is about you have 4 years of experience without your NCLEX. Right now, our openings do require NCLEX. So if you haven't already taken it, I would encourage you to do so. We'd love to speak with you about RN opportunities once you've passed your NCLEX. I see a couple questions about the visa opportunities that we offer. Somebody asks, do you just do EB3? And somebody asks, do you employ for H1B? The exact visa offerings depend on the employer. So some employers offer EB3 and some of them offer H1B. I will say the large majority of our opportunities are for EB3 for green card sponsorship, but we'd be happy to talk with you about the visa opportunities that we have at the time that you apply. I see a couple questions about jobs for biomedical scientists. We do occasionally hire for medical lab technicians and other jobs in medical scientist roles. And so if you're interested in applying, you can fill out an application on our website, or you can visit our live chat and speak with somebody about your exact credentials. I see another question about manufacturing jobs, pharmaceutical relating products. Colleen, are there manufacturing companies out on the West Coast and in Washington?
I can't say for sure. I would assume yes, but I don't have an exact answer.
Awesome. And then the next question is about sponsoring non-NCLEX passer. We don't currently offer sponsorship for you to take your NCLEX, but we do have resources that we can provide you as far as making sure that you have your NCLEX. Another question is about no current bedside. All of our employers do require current bedside experience, and that is because they want you to have that current and relevant experience when you arrive here in the US so that you have that past experience so that you're able to know what you're walking into. So yes, current bedside experience is required. I see another question, is IELTS a requirement before initiating your application with the State Board of Nursing, or I can write the IELTS after my NCLEX? To get hired, we need you, for EB3, we need you to have your NCLEX, and then you can do IELTS later in the process when you do your visa screen after your petition is filed. But your IELTS will be required to get your license verified in the state of Washington. Let's see. I see, Grace, you have some questions about your specific visa situation. I'd encourage you to reach out to our live chat so we could talk with you directly about your specific visa situation, so we can make sure we have all the facts and the whole story. We'd love to be able to assist you as much as possible. I see a question from Pauline about offers for ER nurses in Washington. Our opportunities and units that we hire for regularly change. Like I mentioned, we do have more opportunities coming up in Washington soon. So make sure your recruiter knows that Washington is a priority state for you so that we can get you on that wait list and let you know. Alice has a question. Hi, Alice. Good to see you here. Thanks for joining. I see you have a question about how safe it is to live in Burien. Colleen, do you have any insights for Alice about what the safety looks like in that particular area?
Yeah, it's actually very safe. We have 2 dogs, and I regularly, there's a park that's right on the water there. I've walked my dogs there by myself. Even daylight, even like evening time, it's very safe. Just like any city, be aware of your surroundings, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
safe.
A lot of it depends on like the area that you choose to live in, the neighborhood that you choose to live in, and we have a great relocation team that will help you with that process, as you get moving forward. One last question that we're going to answer today. Can you hire an NCLEX passer registered with the New York Board of Nursing into Washington? The answer is yes. We have a great licensure team that will help you endorse your license to Washington. And so that's not a problem at all. We work with nurses that have passed their NCLEX in a variety of different states, and that won't keep us from helping you get a job in the state that you want. If your question hasn't been answered, or maybe you didn't want to ask it here in the chat, you can see the link here to visit our live chat to connect with our recruiters directly and get immediate answers to your specific situations. If they're not able to help with your unique situation, we'll always get you over to the right person to help you out. And one last thing, I see a couple questions in the chat about nobody has contacted you. Please reach out to the live chat option and we'll make sure to get you over to your recruiter right away. If we have one more slide, we'll go ahead and switch there. I think there's a link to our website or our application process. You can like us on Facebook for immigration updates and new positions. We always are updating you guys when the new visa bulletin comes out, as it did this week. And so check out our Facebook to see past webinars. Colleen, thank you so much for joining me today. It was so great to hear about your experience with Washington. And I hope that some of our nurses get to call Washington home like you do in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day wherever you're joining from, and thanks for being here today.